All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's Thursday. Oh my gosh, time goes by so quick. I always say that, man, but I love what I do. I'm so lucky. It's amazing. I mean, I am incredibly privileged that I get to do this. And that's what it is. I mean, this is what I want to do. I want to try to make a difference, work with people, try to make things just a little better. I know some of you probably think I make things worse. Obviously, I don't see it that way. Before I get into all the topics, and we will center as soon as I start this slide deck, we'll center, as I always do, to start the program, Gaza. But just as an introduction, just want to talk a little bit again about what the Trump election represents. Oh, and by the way, call in 240-242-5646. I actually managed to start the phone, and I think it's going to ring. So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. We live in hope that that the phone system will. It works fine. It's just I don't always hear that ring or see it ring. There's a visual aid too, but it doesn't always trigger me. It does. I don't always notice it. So before we get to the topics, the general, the specific topics, and Gaza to lead off, I've been talking to people I have great respect for, smart people with experience. I've been watching videos of people that I have great respect for, intellectuals, people who've gotten it right in the past. And one of the ideas that I've heard that I think makes some sense plausibly to explain Trump's triumph, as the Washington Post called it yesterday, is that he's some kind of cult or messianic figure, that he is, we've heard this from Arlen too, that he somehow manages to bewitch people, that they're gold into, or they invest in him, they see in him some kind of savior. And certainly we saw to a degree that, or to a significant degree, that happened in Germany 90 plus years ago when Hitler came to power. And certainly there were people before Hitler took power who viewed him as Germany's savior, as somebody who really was going to take the country to levels of greatness that it had not previously experienced, or that in some distant past, in some Wagnerian opera, they were with the gods, some sort of idea like that. And I'm sure there are some in Trump's following, some of his voters who do perceive him that way. But I don't find that to be a compelling explanation for his election. I don't. I think there are specific policy areas, specific policy issues that led to Trump's election, that people made a decision that he would be better for me, that his election will lead to better results for me. And I couple that with not so much love for Trump, although, again, I'm sure there are people who did have that feeling, just as there are people who, you saw the women in tears, and I say women because I didn't see too many men, but there may have been some in the Javits Center back in 2016 who had put so much into Hillary Clinton, that she represented them. They were almost felt as though, I think, they were part of her, and that if she could just somehow break that highest, hardest, as she put it, glass ceiling, their lives would improve markedly. So I think there is that in every election, that people invest in leaders, in representatives, they invest in TV stars and musicians and celebrities, all manner of qualities that aren't really there. I mean, that we see things that aren't there in people. So that of course that would happen with Trump. And maybe to a greater degree. But, in the end, you have to campaign. You have to make decisions when you vote on who checks the boxes that are most important to you. And I do believe, maybe wrongly, call me naive, it doesn't always happen, but I think generally that is how people do vote. And I think it's pretty explicable in this case. So even Chris Hedges, as much as I respect him and he calls Trump a cult figure, which I was a little surprised by, because Hedges is so clear about why people abandon the Democrats, why people dislike the Democrats. I talked about this here. I think it's more hatred towards the Democratic Party at the hypocrisies, the condescension that they feel, and understandably so. I think that explains the election of Trump. The policy, the fact that Kamala always was most comfortable with other elites, with other rubbing elbows with the billionaire class, with the power elites. Even her decision to campaign with bestie Liz Cheney is easily understood in that vein, that here's another, and I get they're two women, right? And they have probably faced challenges, I'm sure, that men didn't. But her decision to hang with a longtime Washington insider, warmonger, anti-populist versus her Midwestern running mate, Tim Walz, told people an awful lot about who Kamala Harris is. It confirmed for them their fears, their suspicion that the decisions that were going to be made that would have direct impact on their lives would be made in back rooms, and they weren't going to be there. And the person who, was governor of a state where many of them live, or they have relatives who live, or it's right next door, the governor of Minnesota, who actually did serve in the military, he wasn't going to be in that room, or if he was in that room, his opinion wasn't going to matter nearly as much as that of longtime Washington insider Liz Cheney and others. Tony West, her brother-in-law, corporate general counsel, Uber, that he was going to be making this, not people who come from their background, who have experienced the challenges that they have. And to me, that explains far more how Trump won. Now, you could say, well, but Trump's from, an elite background as well. Yes, but he never pretends. He doesn't have that pretense of, oh, I feel your pain, right? That he does show, he does claim his policies will benefit working people. And to some degree, it's not all bombast. But I don't think there's ever the sense that you get with Trump of the hypocrisy, the feigning that he'll include you in your decision-making process. He's pretty upfront about his authoritarian tendencies. Again, not defending Trump. I'm trying to explain as best I can what it is that has really alienated so many people from the Democratic Party. So I put up in my little, let's just do first. Yeah, I really need to center the victims of American empire and the victims of Harris Biden right now. I mean, they're not victims of Trump. Trump was not in power when, Trump's policy towards Israel is really bad, and he clearly has zero sympathy or empathy or concern for, well, he doesn't really for anybody, but certainly not for the Palestinian people. Don't expect that to change. But he wasn't president on October 7. He didn't green light genocide. He hasn't been the one who's been signing off on shipment after shipment of bombs, ammunition, guns. He hasn't been there to shoot down missiles that other countries have tried to rain down on Israel to at least cause them to have some consequences for their crimes, their war crimes. He hasn't been there to shoot those down the way Biden and Harris have. So this is on them. This is on Kamala, who was in the rooms, flat out said it. I was in the room when these decisions were made and always agreed with them. So just from the Q's News Network today, this is Dateline, 8:06 a.m. I think that is Eastern time. Local sources, 10 civilians were slaughtered due to an Israeli airstrike that targeted a school sheltering displaced Palestinians. So I highlighted what I think is really tragic, horrifying, criminal about this. the Israeli military there targeted a school sheltering displaced Palestinians in a refugee camp, by the way. Think about that. Read that sentence a few times. The people killed were in a school sheltering displaced Palestinians in a refugee camp. And it says west of Gaza. So is that not in Gaza? Are they actually not even in Gaza at that point? Doesn't say, well, I would assume Gaza City. But I didn't notice that when I first called up that story. That's what's going on right now. Right now. While Harris Biden are in power. From The Guardian. Death toll reaches 42,469. That's the official. They say have been killed and injured in airstrikes. Obviously, it's not just airstrikes. It's the Israeli military on the ground. It's tanks. It's missiles. It's guns, target, shooting children. It's all of that. And the numbers are, as we know, much higher. You can see at the bottom paragraph I put on your screen there. Thousands of other dead people are probably lost in the rubble, maybe never to be identified, just missing. People wondering. Give you the number. This is the number I have now. I don't know how current this is. This is the most current I've seen. It adds to the death count I posted for Monday. So we have 43,469, and that includes 78 people. The Guardian said in the last 24-hour period. So I assume that's Wednesday, because it seemed to have lost a day in there. It's not always, obviously, in the fog of war. Bodies aren't always identified. Death counts are always going to be somewhat approximate. We know the true number is much, much, much. All right, if you want to join me, 240-242-5646. I'd love to talk to you. And I'm not going to play, be ironic or sardonic or sarcastic. I'm just going to make this point. The excuse that I heard from many Harris supporters when I would raise the issue of the raising of Palestine by Israel and her unwavering support for it as a reason that I believe it was immoral to vote for her. The excuse I heard over and over, and I always, well, she says the right thing. She cares. She feels bad. Well, I totally reject that she said the right thing. She always centered the Israeli victims on October 7. She always prefaced any crocodile tears she might shed for Palestinians with with remarks about how terrible October 7 was and the atrocities committed by Hamas. The only criminals, the only violators of human rights and human norms that Kamala Harris could ever bring up was always Hamas, never Israel, never Israeli soldiers, never the Israeli military. So I reject categorically the notion that she said the right things, or she really was signaling with a wink and a nod some underlying concern for the people the victims of Israeli genocide. But all that said, even if she really did have that sense, the argument was, or assuming she did, the argument was, well, she can't do anything right now. She has to get elected. She can't alienate her base. She can't, she's going to lose votes no matter what she does. So her best course of action is to stay supportive of the Biden policy. She can't throw him under the bus. All that nonsense, all that BS, all that crap that's just excuse for genocide. But now that excuse is gone. There's no possible argument that you could make to defend continuing support for Israel. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris will be in power for 2+ months. And this is the time for them to cut off all aid for Israel. Everything. Not one penny, not one sou, not one pfennig to Israel. They did that, that'd be great. That'd be the right thing to do. Be way too late, way too many billions of dollars short, way too many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives lost. All that would be true, but at least finally they would be doing the right thing. I haven't seen it yet. Don't hold your breath. All right, I gave 4 potential explanations. I know some of this I talked about yesterday. This is that important. It's not like you can kind of say, well, it's one show, Hal talked about it, he's not going to talk about it. No, this is an ongoing crime against humanity. And if you have the power to stop it, you have a duty to stop it. And she has the power to stop it. And there's no excuse for not stopping it. And if you say to me, well, she's not the president, okay, then go on TV right now. In your speech at Howard University, why the hell didn't you bring that up? Because I don't think she mentioned it once in her concession speech. Why didn't you call on Trump to demand an end to the slaughter? And call on your president at the same moment to do that. Why didn't you if you really, really are on the side of the people? Well, I mean, the answer is obvious. She ain't. She's just not. I mean, that's just not who Kamala Harris is. All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. Here's the reasons, because I had said I don't think you can lay Trump's triumph, Harris's loss, Kamala's crash, whatever, if we want to be alliterative there, Trump's triumph, Kamala's crash. I think if you're going to say it's because Trump's some sort of messianic cult-like figure, you have to rule out other possibly more plausible explanations. So I think these 4 on your screen in my thumbnail are all more plausible. Yes, the anti-wokeism, I think, was a factor. I put question marks after it because I think it's probably the least important factor. It's hard for me to buy that that was a big factor, right? I just don't see that. But it may have had some impact. And apparently, pundits, supporters do think it had an impact. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I've already brought up genocide. That'll be where I go right after this. Endless war, not quite the same because endless war, I think, it basically subsumes or includes Ukraine and then also decades of neoliberalism. And, the font gets bigger and bigger because I'm saying these are the more important reasons, in my opinion. So I don't think there's any question, but it's the plight of the working class under Democrats and other Republican presidents, and Trump too, right? But the plight of the middle class under Democrats pursuing neoliberal policies since at least Bill Clinton's presidency and his signing off on NAFTA, his deregulation of media, his signing Glass-Steagall, promoting it, pushing for most favored nation status for China, the trade deals that Obama signed, all of them, right? It all adds up. Bailing out the big banks, not the underwater homeowners, the Obamacare, which is neoliberalism on steroids. We're going to use taxpayer money to enrich private companies that will provide at great profit for themselves essential government service, which is healthcare. So, so those policies have been devastating, incredibly bad for us, and that's why voters voted for Trump. And I don't think you can really separate out, obviously, they kind of all go together, but specifically, the anti-wokeism goes along with the neoliberalism. Republicans are pro-corporate, just like Democrats. Republicans have pursued the same bad policies, although Trump speaks against them much more so than others have. But Republicans give voters scapegoats, other targets for their ire, their anger. Democrats tend not to, or they tend to embrace those scapegoats. So then you have war between the scapegoats, working class, right? Democrats scapegoat blue collar workers, working class. How could they be so stupid as to vote for Trump? And of course, Republicans blame immigrants and the like. So you set up a battle of the underclass, which is perfect for elites. Either way, they win. I thought, and I said, we'll go to genocide first because I was just talking about Israel and its war on the people of Gaza and its elimination, its eradication of Gazans. I thought on the margins that would be an issue that would probably hurt Harris and help Trump to a degree. And when I looked at the exit polls, and I'm just going to talk about Michigan now. I'm not going to look at all of them. But when I looked at the exit polls, and I talked about this yesterday, and I saw the vote for Jill Stein. And this has probably been updated. I just used yesterday's because I was busy with a lot of prep, and I just didn't have time to get updated figures. Sorry about that. When I looked at the figure, and I saw Stein only had 0.8%. I'm like, nah, well, I guess she didn't really draw enough support to make a big difference. And if you look at it, if you add her 0.8% to Harris's 48.2%, they come to 49%. So it basically doesn't even cut the gap that Trump had opened up in half. It doesn't cut that gap in half. So I was like, nah, I don't think it's the issue. The way the Green Party did actually have more votes, I believe, in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania than the gap between Trump and Hillary back in 2016. So I was like, oh. And I wasn't happy about that because I want the Green Party to be successful. I voted Green Party. I believe in the Green Party. I think the Green Party is really our only hope that I can identify at this time. But maybe I was a little bit wrong. I saw some other data, which we'll get to in just a moment, that kind of makes me think differently, that yes, the genocide was a factor. It may not have been decisive. I mean, you add them all up, right? But, say, well, was this one factor on its own just positive? Maybe when you look at those numbers, probably not. They may have come up with some new figures that are different, and I don't know. But this headline from the Detroit Free Press, I think, explains pretty well why I'm more inclined to believe that the Harris-Biden unwavering support for the Israeli genocide, the endless atrocities against the pogroms against the Palestinian people, not just primarily in Gaza, but not just in Gaza, also in the West Bank, and now expanded into Lebanon as well. Look at this. So Trump won Dearborn, which is a predominantly, I believe, Muslim city, the most highest density, the highest concentration of Muslims, Arabs in this country. And I know Arab and Muslim are not synonymous. There are non-Muslim Arabs, and there are, of course, more Muslims who aren't Arabs than who are. But Arab Muslims do live in Dearborn, and they voted for Trump. So that 0.8% that Jill Stein received statewide isn't the whole story when it comes to the Arab and Muslim vote and pro-Palestine vote. Because many voted for Trump. When the Dearborn mayor endorsed Trump. And they said, you know what? Harris is so bad. We've given her every single opportunity to renounce Israel, to call for an embargo, to say that she will stop funding genocide. We've done this over. We've asked repeatedly, and she's never even thrown us a bone. She didn't she kept a pro-Palestine voice off of the DNC stage, even when that voice was going to endorse her. So yeah, this was a factor. This mattered. This hurt her. And it should have. I mean, of course it should have. And I'm not going to accept the claim, well, it doesn't matter, they're just stupid. I saw this. Oh, they're stupid because he's even worse. He'll be even worse. You're asking people who are watching their relatives, their co-religionists, their friends being slaughtered with weapons that are being handed to their killers by Biden Harris. You're asking those people to vote for Harris. You realize how crazy that sounds? That seems to me the ultimately stupid statement, that you would expect people to vote for the candidate who is arming their family and friends' murderer. Lots and lots of libs can't get it. They don't get it. They won't get it. They refuse to get it. Michelle Goldberg, I think, is one of the least compelling, least interesting columnists among a group of the Lilliputians who infest the New York Times editorial and op-ed pages. She's really bad. I mean, she's really insipid. She's not like Bret Stephens, who's just flat out evil. But she's just sort of a useless character. So she wrote this column yesterday, posted, what does it say, the 6th? Yeah, about how this is who we are now. We're this horrible, evil country because we voted for Trump. She's embarrassed. She's ashamed. But she also reflects an ignorance of what happened, why it happened. She can't wrap her arms around it. She can't wrap her hands. So I gave you the reasons, right? The genocide that is so upsetting to people. And it should be. It should be upsetting to many more of you. The endless war in Ukraine, we'll get to that in a little bit. The anti-wokeism, which I think played a factor, that's what I guess she's going to hang her hat on. That just shows how bad people are, that they let themselves be triggered by anti-wokeism. I think that was the least important factor, but it plays a role because when people are angry, they've been let down by government repeatedly, they have no allies or friends in what is the so-called more liberal party, the progressive party, the pro-worker party, they're going to look for scapegoats. So she doesn't get that. She doesn't understand that. She's befuddled by it. She's flummoxed by it. She's confused. That being Michelle Goldberg. And she tries to understand it. She talks about other populist demagogues, right-wing demagogues who got elected around the world, like Orban or Meloni. I don't know who that is. Italy, yes. Germany is right now failing. The government there is failing. You can blame Harris for spending too much time courting moderate Republican women. I most certainly do. Or for the vagueness of her opportunity economy rhetoric. I most certainly do, because what she was saying to working people is, you're screwed under me. I'm going to do nothing for you. That's what her courting Liz Cheney, who's not moderate by any means. That's what the message that Kamala Harris sent loud and clear, the "we're not going back" message. We're not going back to a time when workers are paid a living wage and unions have the density of union membership is significant enough to really protect working people. We're not going back to that. You'll have an opportunity. And a few of you will probably become billionaires, and most of you will live desperate lives and die young if you're born to a working class or worse family, poorer family. But then she goes on, but few politicians anywhere have figured out how to hold together a coalition that includes both affluent, educated, cosmopolitan elites, meaning her, obviously, and blue-collar workers who prize tradition and social stability. Well, I think that's such a load of crap. Politicians have most certainly figured it out. FDR figured it out. LBJ figured it out. Bernie figured it out. What you need to do is guarantee everyone has enough and no one has too much. And you, Michelle Goldberg, with your incredibly influential column in the most important paper in the world, could have played a role in educating people to this very fact. Hey, We're in New York City, the most important city in the world, the most powerful, the wealthiest city in the world. We have a lot here. We're lucky. We got great restaurants. We have all this culture, museums. We have a pretty good public transit system. We enjoy all of this. But if we want to keep it, you know what we have to do? We have to make sure that everyone has enough, that everyone has health care, not just us. That everyone has culture, not just us. And that may mean we get a little less. Some of us have a little less. That's might be unfortunate for them, but let's not shed tears for them because they're already rich. They're already Wall Street barons, law firm partners, best-selling authors, publishers. Yeah, they may have to make do with a rental in East Hampton rather than a mansion on the water. That's true. But the trade-off is a stable society. The trade-off is freedom. It's worth it. That would have been her role. That's what she could have done. That's what she should have done. Instead, she rubs her hands together. She frets. She laments. She has a pity party. Well, then this is what you get. Then she goes on to say he will not give people the economic relief they're craving. Probably true. But my response then is, why didn't you demand that Harris? You get it, right? That's the big factor here is economics. And yet you supported a vague, you admitted it, right? Vague opportunity economy booster who campaigns with not moderate Republicans, hard right warmongers. Do you see, Michelle, how you missed it? You don't get it? Then she goes on, so condescending. I have little doubt that many of those who voted for him will live to regret it, come to regret it. Well, I'm sure they will. I'm sure some will. We all have our regrets. We all have our regrets. But I always say to people, try to be a little bit more open to your own mistakes, your own errors. You can learn more from them than you can from those you impute to others. Some might say to me, well, Hal, what about all your mistakes, right? How come you don't come clean with them? Okay, I'll admit it. I'll acknowledge mistakes. When I left radio, the media business, I floundered around. I was trying to figure out what to do. I looked at various options, and ultimately I was able to land a position, and I viewed myself at the time as extremely fortunate with our evolution, a progressive, at the time, I thought Bernie Sanders affiliated organization. And I was so pleased I got a salary, right? It wasn't even a bad salary to do the work. At least I didn't think of it as a bad salary. It was pretty good. I was pretty happy to get it. But you know what? I thought I was doing valuable, important work. I really believed that. But I've come to recognize that these groups, they do feed off of their donors. They do provide false hope. Oh, we're going to make a difference. But ultimately, they're always, they ultimately morph into a group that exists to continue to pay their staff and, most importantly, their executives, their supervisory leadership. They morph into that. Their fundraising is more and more focused on generating enough cash so that they can enjoy their, some want to say lavish, but comfortable lifestyle. And the impact that they have becomes muted. And in fact, in order to raise money, they often mute their message because the funders, the donor class, always is to the right of the rank and file. So the donor class wants our evolution to back Kamala and campaign for Kamala and support Kamala. But the best outcome for working class people, for whom the organization ostensibly was created, is to build a viable alternative to the. But there isn't enough money to do that. There isn't enough contributions and donations to do that. There are donors who will fund phone parties to elect Kamala, to fund door knocking. But, I was wrong. I thought that organization could make a difference, but I'm more and more convinced that you could really need volunteer-led groups. Much as it's sad, because people who work so hard to elect somebody should be getting paid, and there may be ways to do it, and maybe you have some kind of I don't know, because if you're getting donations from individuals, there's always going to be some conflict between what the donor wants, what the rank and file in the organization want, what the employees of the organization want, what the leadership wants. It's very, very hard to split that baby, but maybe we have to keep trying. But what I learned is, these groups aren't necessarily going to act in ways that are productive, that are helpful, that are progressive. So that, I don't know if I would say that was a mistake exactly, but anyway, I put up on screen, or I'm just putting it up now, my response, which I posted, got a lot of likes. You don't always get a lot of likes. I got a lot of recommends for this one in the New York Times. I don't want to go through all of it, but what I wrote that I highlighted, I think is relevant. Goldberg's confusion over the proper response to the millions of economically insecure voters who rejected Harris is particularly odd. So remember, she said that Trump isn't going to give them what they want, economic security, and she also insisted that no one knows how to sort of square the circle between workers who are more, as she would say, craving stability. It was a little condescending, obviously, and the educated, forward-thinking, cosmopolitan, urban elites like herself. Well, the answer, as I said, is totally obvious. Make sure the poor, struggling, and working class have enough, that they have health care. These are the things that make life worth living. Education. You get paid a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. Secure retirement. Culture is really important. We don't talk about that. Peace. I didn't include a clean environment, but that's part of it too. It's not difficult. The only reason it's difficult is because the New York Times doesn't want that message in its pages. It doesn't want to be promoting economic justice. Because if it did, it would lose advertising. It's just that simple. It will lose grant money. It gets all sort of manner of, big full-page ads. Doesn't want to lose that. Okay, got this comment. So we talk about wokeism, anti-wokeism. By the way, sort of surprised. No call. I don't even see any chat in there. Is anyone chatting? Let me see this. Let's see if we can get. I think got a little bit of audio there too. I'm not sure, but I should be live. I heard myself. I know we're live. You probably heard me earlier in the thing, because I saw played the audio for just a second. There's just a little bit of a test, but yeah, I just heard it again. I don't know if you did. 240-242-5646. So did the Democratic embrace of, I guess, under marginalized groups, did that hurt? That's what you would sort of call woke. And I don't think it's really marginalized. It's sort of these performative is what I would call woke. Like when you have land acknowledgments. Like if I came on my program at noon every day and I said, I acknowledge that I'm on land that was originally stolen, that was originally, occupied by indigenous peoples, and it was stolen from them. That's the land acknowledgement. It doesn't do anything for anybody. It doesn't make life better for the indigenous peoples who were genocided or the few descendants who survived. That doesn't make life better for them. What would make life better for them is if we guaranteed them health care and we made sure they had land on which to live and farm and go back to a life that's sort of like a little bit maybe what their ancestors had. That's what we should be doing. But things like land acknowledgements, changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, I get the reason behind it. I'm not necessarily averse to that, but that doesn't do anything for anybody. Doesn't make life easier. It's performative. That's what I would call wokeism, right? So, is that a factor? Well, I want to just show this comment from Halitics, one of the posters there, and they go into all the ways that these issues, these quote woke issues, unquote, or cultural issues, hurt the Democrats. And I'm kind of like, I think economics rules. But if you're faced with two parties that both have given you the back of the hand when it comes to some kind of fairness in treatment, then yeah, you will be irritated. You're going to be like, wait a second, why are we paying for trans? Why is the government paying for trans kids to get surgery? Why are, in schools, why do my kids have to, why does my cis daughter have somebody who was a boy in her locker room, if that's happening? And these are overstated and they're exaggerated. I do have a problem. I made it very, very clear. I don't believe that those conceived males should be competing against girls and women. Sports. I think that should just be the cutoff. You're XY, you don't compete against XX in sports. I believe. I agree with that. But all of these issues take on undue importance for people when they feel like their concerns, that they be treated decently at work, that they have an opportunity for their kids to go to college. When people don't get treated in a way that they recognize as fair, then they're going to be very, very angry when they think other groups are getting privileges that they're not getting. So I think that's fair. I think that's a big reason. Now, I didn't go into, there's like the 9, I think is relevant, the undertone of condemnation of men. I think that's true. I think that it's very fair for people who are members of what are considered to be privileged identity groups to be really bitter and resentful, because lots of men are poor. Lots of white people are poor. They don't have as much as lots of people who are trans, lots of straight, cis, is that there, I guess, people who identify, non-trans, straight people, white people, males, their lives suck. They have little or nothing. If they're not, some are homeless, others are just barely making it to the end of each month with enough to pay rent for the next month. So for them to be told, oh, well, you have so much, you don't deserve reparations, and you shouldn't get this, and if your life isn't good, it's your own fault because you had every advantage. Of course they're going to be pissed off. So yeah, it makes a difference. And what I say to those who are members of either marginalized groups or who champion such groups, who feel like trans issues are them, I know there are people who really think, and I shouldn't have said really like it's some kind of a shock, but there are people who absolutely elevate trans issues to become the most important issue. Some of them are because they're trans, but they might know somebody who's trans, or for whatever reason, people who canceled J.K. Rowling. So what I say to you is, if you are concerned about the treatment of transgender people in society, then fight for fair treatment for everyone. Fight to make sure working people have enough and nobody has too much. Because when there's inequality, when famine stalks the land, people are not in the mood to be particularly generous, caring, or empathize with those who are members of different groups. When push comes to shove, people put themselves first, those who look like them first, who grew up with them first. So the best way to have some kind of equality, justice, fairness in society for all groups is to ensure that everyone has enough and no one has too much. That's something the Democrat Party is completely unconcerned with. That's an alien message to the Democratic Party. So I responded. I didn't want to get too much into the social justice stuff. I think it's really important. I'm not saying I don't, but I want to get into debates over, whether this, is a legitimate concern or not. Are people's concerns about trans people legitimate or not? I think some are. I do, I don't think it's appropriate for bio males. That's the term I was looking for, by the way, not conceived male, but bio males. That's the term I was looking for. I don't use what is it? Oh, assigned male at birth is absurd. You're not assigned. You're one or the other, or except for a tiny percentage who are neither, or both. But I agree. Yeah, absent powerful, sincere, progressive, populist economic agenda, Dems are very vulnerable to socially conservative messages. And then the response was, well, many of them make sense. And I don't want to get into that right now. I mean, we could debate it. I think some do make some sense, and I think some don't. But I don't want to get into that in this moment. But I understand they're very fraught. But I think the way we avoid really serious arguments over them is, again, or at least we can postpone them, as we focus on the big prize, which is everyone has enough. No one has too much. Everyone has a home. Everyone has healthcare. Everyone has education. Everyone has secure retirement and the whole panoply. And again, that's something that the Democrats couldn't give two craps about. Maybe Bernie does, but Bernie ain't no Democrat. We'll hear from Bernie in a moment. Here is Morning Joe. He seems to put a lot on the woke or anti-woke agenda. He seemed to think that was a big factor in the election. And of course he would, because he's elite, he's privileged. Better to say, well, the Democrats lean too heavily into woke issues and it pissed off working class voters. Anything's better than saying, no, I should be taxed at a higher rate, which is, that's his concern. So yeah, let's blame it on wokeism.
Billions of dollars on political ads focusing on transgender issues in the final stretch of the race. Kamala is for they, them, one said. Trump is for you. Quote, the ads of the transgender stuff were really unsettling to the people, said Deb Dassow, chair of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin's Ozaukee County, a Republican stronghold in the Milwaukee suburbs that broke for Trump. So
I'll stop it right there, because I played one of those ads, and they were on TV all the time, and I thought they were cartoonish. I really did. I was like, how could anyone give a crap? Like, she's for they, them, Trump's for you. I just was like, come on, man. No one's going to fall for this crap. And maybe they didn't. But this Republican organizer did. It got her worked up, and so that, to that degree, that helps Trump. If you can get your people on the ground motivated, that's a big deal. And it certainly couldn't have hurt him when you look at the final tally. I mean, he probably outperformed the polls. So yeah, they made a difference.
You don't have to be a Republican, though I was a Republican. You don't have to be a conservative, though I was a conservative, to understand that seeing ad after ad after ad in NFL football games saying that taxpayers were going to be funding transgender surgeries for inmates is not something that's going to play well in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania among men. Mm-hmm. And yet they just didn't respond to it.
So I'm surprised when he's, really? But again, Morning Joe Scarborough's conservative, right? He just said it. He's conservative, but he supported Harris 100%. Why? Because she's conservative, right? Because he's perfectly comfortable with her policies. A Reagan Democrat, or I guess he was more like, was he like the 2000, the anti-Clinton wave? I'm not sure when. Harris has moved to them. The Democratic Party has moved to where Joe Scarborough was 24 years ago. So of course he's going to support her, just like Liz Cheney.
Afraid to respond to it because it might offend some small subset of their base. And the thing.
So he's saying, yeah, the Democrats don't want to say anything because if they complain about the ads, it looks like they're saying we support trans people, and they don't want to say that because that would offend some of the working class voters, I guess, or not necessarily working class, but just anti-trans voters, including Joe. He even said himself he didn't love it. He didn't love the policy.
He's saying to be anything but kind to all Americans. This just had to do with responding to the ad and saying, hey, wait a second, that was Donald Trump's policy that they're attacking. But they wouldn't even do that because...
Right, so that's the irony is apparently under Trump, there was no change. I mean, he was like, yeah, fine, whatever. Give the inmates, you want to be trans, you're an inmate, you can get this reassignment surgery. So incredibly hypocritical of Trump. But what Scarborough is saying here is the Democrats don't want to offend anybody. They're too afraid to do that.
They're afraid to offend, always afraid to offend, always afraid to offend on border security. All
right. So, yeah, and I agree with that. And you know why they're afraid to offend? Because their support is so thin, because they don't have any strong base that's there for them, because they haven't been there for you, because they haven't fought for you, because they haven't fought for a clean environment, they haven't fought for a living wage, they haven't fought for unions, they haven't fought for peace. So they have to be incredibly careful to try not to offend people. And of course, that policy leads to defeat. Bernie coming out swinging at the Dems. After the smoke is cleared, the ballots are counted, the votes are counted, he is apoplectic at the Democratic elites. It should come as no surprise that a Democratic Party, which has abandoned working people, would find that the working class has abandoned them. And he makes the inarguable point that it's the entire working class, Latino and black workers as well. And we saw, that blacks really didn't move over to the Trump side to the same degree as Latinos, Asians, but they did to a degree, especially black men. So he's saying, hey, we don't support workers. They're not going to support us. It's that simple. And he gives you some very, very relevant data points. I didn't even realize this. 60% of us live paycheck to paycheck. That's Michelle Goldberg. That's the problem that you refuse to grapple with. You refuse to acknowledge. And 50 years ago, the average American worker was doing better in terms of real wages. They had more buying power in 1974 than they do today. Now, that's so incredibly important for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, it's awful. It's just awful. It's just not right. Given, and I wouldn't say that. Look, 50 years ago, we were wealthy. So we don't need to keep getting wealthier. But if the society as a whole is generating more and more wealth, and all of it is going, in fact, more than all that's generated, because the average worker is actually taking home less, meaning, in terms of their buying power. So not only is the billionaire class astronomically wealthier than they were 50 years ago, but they've taken everything that every new dollar that's been generated, every surplus dollar that's been generated over the past 50 years has gone to the pockets of the rich and more. They've actually reached into the pockets of American workers. Of course, they're looking for something else. Of course, they want something different. Kamala Harris never once discussed it. So Bernie, you're right. You nailed it. You absolutely did. Except, and I didn't first see this from Brianna Joy Gray, although she tweeted this out. But I saw her tweet and I wanted to highlight it because I think her response was my response. Okay, yeah, you're right, Bernie. Good point. Except, why didn't you run yourself? Why did you back Joe Biden? Why did you fight so hard to keep Biden the candidate when it's his policies, it's his president's policies, meaning Obama, it's Bill Clinton's policies that have it's Hillary Clinton's policies, as well as, of course, let's put plenty of blame on Reagan and the Bushes and Trump. You can blame them all. But although I understand under Trump, actually, real wages did rise. But since you do get it, why did you support Harris? Why did you support Biden? What's the point, says Brianna, of being an independent if you spend your political capital manufacturing consent for candidates who you apparently don't believe in? So, of course, those are pointed questions. The answer is there's no point. There's no point. You're not getting anything from them. They're not going to change their policies. They give you the back of the hand every chance they get. They blame you for their losses. So why would you back them? Why would you support them? You shouldn't. I mean, it's obvious. You shouldn't. And Brianna Joy Gray has made this point on her program every now and then that she and Bernie have zero relation. She worked for Bernie. Was she his campaign director? I don't know. She had a pretty high position. Maybe she was the communications czar, whatever. She had a very high position in Bernie's campaign in 2020. And she's made the point many times, I've heard her say, she has no relationship with him. He's ghosted her. He doesn't respond to her. She'd love to have him on her program. He won't come. And some of the former staffers on the campaign don't like to talk to her either because she's really pointed. She's like, I'm not going to handle Bernie or his campaign guys and gals with kid gloves. No, this is serious business. This is the quality of life in America. These are often life and death issues, such as Gaza. So Bernie, I don't understand. You say you're for working people. You point out how workers have gotten screwed. You've said repeatedly you disagree with the Biden-Harris policy with respect to Israel, and yet you go out and campaign for them. What the hell is that about? Why would you do that? Peace, war, endless war. Americans, one of the big factors that never, ever is discussed when elites, newspaper publishers, writers, columnists discuss Trump's win in 2016 over Hillary, one of the very important factors that is always ignored is that she was perceived correctly as the pro-war candidate, is that her record reflected virtually no exceptions, unexceptional support for American military adventurism overseas. And the heartland especially doesn't like that. They don't want that. They don't want money apparently going to pay for surgeries for trans inmates, and they don't want their money going to Ukraine either. And they didn't want in 2016 their money going to more wars with Syria and around the world. And that was a big reason they voted for Trump, who had come out early against the war with Iraq and who was talking about peace with Russia, unlike Hillary. So that was a major factor. Families in swing states in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, families who had members serving multiple tours of duty broke heavily for Trump. Much more heavily for Trump than other similar families demographically, but that were not service families, or who may have had somebody in the service who only served 1 or 2 tours of duty, or may have been an officer, or whose the soldier in the family was retired and wasn't being shot at anymore or shooting at people. But this never gets discussed. But it was a factor then, and it's a factor now. September 24 poll from Responsible Statecraft. Americans want Ukraine talks, conditions on aid to Israel. So that's across the board. That's bipartisan. And then you see there's some other issues that are split. But when it comes to Ukraine, yes, the Washington elites and many liberals whose posts I see consistently on social media think we have some obligation, some duty to the people of Ukraine to keep them fighting and dying in a war against Russia, rather than an obligation to promote peace and stop the war and save their lives. Well, most Americans obviously aren't falling for that crap, that nonsense, that it's somehow better for Ukraine if we keep them fighting until they're all dead. Obviously, they're not buying that. Most Americans want peace talks, want negotiations, which we stymied, which we stopped, which we kiboshed with conservative PM Boris Johnson, which Harris Biden stopped with conservative PM Boris Johnson. All right, there's Trump. We'll get him on in just a sec. I'm going to play this. You know, I hear this a lot on other people's podcasts and live streams and the like is, yeah, please do subscribe, man. Let's get the, I mean, I'm sort of stuck at 262. It seems like it's such a low number, it seems to me, although at least it's higher than it was, but it's, you know, let's get those. The more I see on some of my videos have definitely, there's definitely an uptick in views. So if you like what I'm doing, you've already subscribed, here's what I ask you to do. Send my video to a friend. Say, hey, this guy's pretty good. If you think that. And if you think I suck, send it anyway and say, this guy sucks. But that would be lovely. You know, that would really be nice. So yeah, try to spread it around because this is a community effort. The goal is to build a better world here. That's what we're doing this for. That's what I'm doing this for. Here's Trump explaining what he would do when it comes to Ukraine.
I will prevent, and very easily, World War III, very easily.
All right, let me stop it. Now, that sounds kind of ridiculous. Right? I'm like so grandiose, and he is a buffoon. But people are afraid of World War III, and with good reason. Remember, I don't know how many of you would remember. I remember coming home from school when I was a kid. Sometimes we would have these air raid drills. People were really legitimately afraid that we would get targeted by Russia. There could be a thermonuclear war involving the Soviet Union. And now we may be involved in a low-level nuclear war with the Soviet Union, with the former Soviet Union, now Russia. So people have that fear. They're scared. They should be scared. And Trump's saying, no, if I'm president, it won't happen. What did the polls say? We want talks. We want negotiations. The way that's characterized by the liberal media and by many Democrats is talks as you give Putin everything he wants, including Ukraine. Obviously, that's ridiculous. That's not what talks mean. Talks mean you talk. Talks mean you come to some kind of agreement that both sides can live with, which, by the way, they were close to in 22 until Harris Biden torpedoed it. This is why Trump won.
Arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly.
And you can see people like that because they don't want endless war. They don't want the world's most lethal fighting force, as Harris put it during one of the debates. Trump said, we don't have to play the rest of it, but what he said, hey, I'd put in a call to Putin. That's what I would do. And that's exactly what Americans want. They want talks. What did Trump say? We'll have a talk. I'll call him. That's what we want. So if you're looking for reasons that Trump won, you can come up with a host. Some of them aren't very flattering to his supporters. Yes, I think the woke issues were relevant. But why don't we treat them like Americans who have understandable concerns? Why can't we empathize with their desire for a decent life? For enough. If you want to win, if you want peace, they say that if you want peace, work for justice. Well, justice means everyone has enough. That's not your Democratic Party. The only answer at this point is what Brianna said there to Bernie. Why didn't you support a third party? So I see this up a lot. I saw this meme today. This is what I'm going to end the program with. By the way, sorry nobody called. I gotta believe I'm going out. I mean, I can see it's going out. I could hear it. So I saw this meme, mourn and organize. And I've seen this from a lot of people. Well, don't get mad, organize. Don't, that's what we need to do. And I agree that organize is important, but we have to figure out what we're organizing for. What's our target? What's our goal? How are we going to organize? Are we just organizing to elect any Democrat? Any blue will do? Is that the goal? Because I'm not signing up for that goal. I ain't organizing for that. Is the goal we're going to try to Dem enter and elect more AOCs and Jamal Bowmans? Because I ain't signing up for that either. There has to be soul searching, not just among Democrats, not just a question, well, are we really on the side of working people? Did we lose working people because we had a bad message, or did we lose working people because we're not on their side? And I think they would, even Chucky Schumer said, hey, for every working person in Pittsburgh we lose, we can get someone in the suburbs of Philadelphia and Cleveland and on and on. So that's what they made a conscious decision to do, and it's backfired and they lose. But they don't really lose because they're going to get more and more money from the billionaire class and they get golden parachutes and everything else. But we lose. So you want to organize, I'm all for it. But we've got to decide what we're organizing for, what our goal is, what our ultimate goal is, and how we're going to get to it. I think a lot of progressive Democrats I share their goals pretty much. Certainly healthcare for all, a living wage. How we would get there, I think there's some disputes, obviously. Those of you who think tariffs are a bad idea, you've drunk the neoliberal Kool-Aid. It's absurd. They're essential. Even if, Trump didn't implement them very intelligently, but tariffs are critical, or we don't get to the society we need and want without tariffs. I'll put it that way, or without a fossil fuels tax. But I think a lot of progressives share my same views on the environment, or at least they have the same goals. But how we get there is where the challenges come in. At this point, I'm more and more convinced that only an alternative to the duopoly can possibly lead to lead us to a better place, to start addressing genocide, ecocide. I really don't see either of the two parties being the answer. So we have to figure out what I would love to organize for, the Green Party or some other really progressive group. There aren't a lot of people out there who are doing that. You saw 4%, 0.4%. 0.4% of the vote nationwide. And even to the extent that the anti-genocide vote mattered, it wasn't necessarily because they voted for Jill Stein, the only anti-genocide candidate on the ballot in many states. It wasn't for that reason. It was because they said, needless to say, Trump's not the answer. All right, that'll do it for me. I'll be back tomorrow, being Friday, the free-for-all. I heartily expect we'll have Arlen Monday. So I'm looking forward to that, getting his thoughts. I'm sure he's not a real happy camper right now, and I'm sorry about that. Very sorry. See you soon. Have a good one.